Everybody understands forms of business, everybody understands the basic equation, everybody understands ethics, everybody understands SWOT and strategic. I wanted to spend the day going back over contracts, torts, and property, and then that'll get us in position to go forward on Monday. Contracts have three things: offer, acceptance, and consideration, which is like payment, value, dollars. Now, the problem with contracts is often you only have two. In business, it is not unusual that you only have two. Right out here, they were offering candy bars, okay, and had the price on it. That's an offer. I accept it. I picked the candy bar up. I then paid the consideration. That's a contract. All right, when you walk downtown and they have a banner in the building that says, you know, Nike's 20% off, that's an offer. If you go in the store and start picking up the Nikes and looking at them and then pay for it, it's a contract. There's an offer, you accepted it, and you've paid for it. But in business, when you're dealing with tens of millions of dollars, somebody may offer $10 million worth of solar chips or solar panels. Corporation A sells solar panels, and they send out an ad in a business journal, or they put an ad online. 10 million solar panels at, you know, $1 million. Corporation B orders them. Corporation B orders them. That's an acceptance. So you got 10 million, you got 1 million in the acceptance. Corporation B doesn't pay the consideration. And Corporation A asks for it in 30 days, and they say, no, we will pay for it in 60 days. 60 days come, and they say, no, we'll pay for it in 90 days. Is that a broken contract? Is that a breached contract? Yeah. No, because it never was a contract. A contract has to have all three. So if you never got the consideration, that contract is called void. And you would sue to get the money, but you wouldn't sue for breach of contract because there's never been any money passed. Let's say they pay the money and then the solar panels don't work. That is a breach of contract. You see the difference? All three are there in one instance: offer, acceptance, and consideration, and then the solar panels are ineffective. So there's a lawsuit over the breach in the contract. If there's never been any consideration, then there's never been any contract. Express, implied. What's expressed? Written. How do you have an implied contract? By actions of whom? Right. Two businesses, two people act in a manner that it's implied that there is a contract. Generally that means acts over a period of time, but it could actually be one time. But usually it's over a period of time. Okay, so, and the implied contract is as good as an express contract, but you just don't see many of them in business. Most of what you see in business are going to be express contracts. Any questions about contracts? On your tests, on your final exam, or on any practice tests, look for key words. All right, look for did not pay. Look for accepted. Look for ask if they want it. Look for words that would equal an offer or equal an acceptance or equal a payment. And those are your key words. All right, torts. Everybody that turned the paper in this is a good example of how I grade. Everybody that saw, that wrote about torts, this is also a torts issue. Everybody that put that in the practice midterm was able to give the torts equation or the torts sentence properly. But not enough people, I would say 50%, didn't catch that spoiled ice cream that made somebody sick is a tort. All right? Maybe it's my fault. I kept talking about slipping in the food line. Well, slipping on a rotten tomato in the food line isn't the only tort. I mean, there may be a million of them. Food, traffic accidents, getting sick, going to the restaurant and getting salmonella, yeah.
Do we have total between tort and negligence?
For purposes of this class, same thing. All right. That's a great question. For purposes of 101, torts and negligence are the same thing. Remember, I grade your recognition of one of the issues. I grade your recognition of one of the issues. Somebody told me this morning that the other business law professors, anybody got Harpool for business law? You do? He gave y'all an 80 question test?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that? Yeah. That's one way to grade, one way to teach. It's not my way to do it, all right? You may know the answer to all 80 questions, and 4 years from now, when you get out on business, you're not going to recognize one of the questions. All you do is memorization. What I teach is you have to recognize spoiled ice cream that makes somebody sick is a tort. I'm not going to give you a test that says, give me the tort equation. Or the tort equation is A, B, C, D, all of the above. I'm going to give you a fact situation and you have to say, yes, if I get sick in an ice cream parlor, that equals a tort. That's very important to me that you understand that. All right? So when 50% of you missed it, I was a little concerned that you didn't catch a lot of things can be torts and negligence. Okay? It can be running a stop sign. It can be, if you can buy $10 million worth of trucks and have bad brakes, and the brakes fail and somebody gets hit, that's a tort. That's a tort. Everybody understand that, okay? Anybody need to go over that anymore? Okay. Property. Real. Personal. Real property is land, is real estate. It also includes what's called a fixture. It's really easy to remember what a fixture is. Think of a farm with a barn on it. If you go buy a farm, if you retire and you always wanted to have a couple of cows, and you buy a farm and it's got a barn on it, that barn is called a fixture. It is part of the land. You can't pick it up and move it. If there are 3 tractors on the land, that is not real estate. That is not real property. The tractors are personal property. So real property is land and anything that can't be moved. How many people here from South Carolina? All right. One of the problems that we have in South Carolina that you probably have never had explained to you is money for schools. All right? All the schools are underfunded. Well, that's because South Carolina uses property taxes to pay for schools. Not road taxes or not sale taxes. They use property taxes. Well, every time a mobile home is put on a piece of land and that mobile home's got 10 kids living in it, they're going to school for free. Because mobile homes, if you can move it, is not land. If you can move it, it's a fixture. I mean, it's not a fixture. It's personal property. And personal property taxes don't go to the schools. When you pay your car taxes, that doesn't go to the schools. The only thing that goes to the schools are real property taxes. And in South Carolina, we've got, 1 trillion mobile homes. If a mobile home, the wheels are taken off and put up on blocks, it becomes real estate. And the owner of that mobile home pays for schools. But as long as it can be moved, it is personal property. Just think about that a minute. I mean, think about how much money we lose by taxing in that manner. The seller is called a grantor. He sells to the grantee, who is the buyer, by deed. A deed is just a piece of paper. When I was practicing law in the 80s and 90s, a deed was one piece of paper. Deeds now might run 100 pages. And they're all online, but they can be very, very complicated. But deeds have one thing in common, whether it's a piece of paper or whether it's on the internet. Blah, 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 and then it's got a paragraph, blah, blah, blah. That paragraph is called a property description. And it doesn't really matter what else the deed says. It'll say who bought it and who sold it, but the property description is what you sell. Right? So if I sell this dry erase marker, if I sell it 10 times and I describe it as white, 6 or 7 inches long with a black tip and a black felt marker, and then I sell it again 10 years later, and I describe it the same way, and I sell it again 10 years later, but it's got a cap on it. And then the next 8 times it's sold, it's described as having a cap on it. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because is the buyer buying the correct pen? Well, it's the same thing with land. If this description of land, if this property description says 100 acres, you have to go back 70 years and look at every deed. Now, if you're lucky, it's maybe only been sold 1 time. But if it's been sold 5 or 6 times over the last 70 years, an attorney has to go to the courthouse and has to find every deed and has to read every property description. And if in 1970 it says 99 acres, well, you have to find the other acre. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe somebody gave it to their grandson and just never did record a deed. But it has to be corrected. Because when you buy the 100 acres, you want to know that's what you're getting. Everybody see that square? Okay. If I ask one of you, if I was your boss, and I ask one of you, go find me 100 acres, we're going to expand, we're going to build a warehouse. All right? So you go out and you find a 100-acre piece of property, got trees all over it, covered with pines, and you say, you do the 70-year search, and you find everything's fine, so you buy it, your company puts $1 million warehouse on it, and then your company builds a fence all the way around it. Maybe they're making something toxic. Maybe they're using chemicals. But they don't want anybody to get hurt, so they build a fence all the way around it. Everybody's happy. And then all of a sudden, some old lady comes down the road and tries to get right here, and there's a fence. And she calls the company and says, I can't get to my house. Her house is back here. And you've put up a fence. Well, it turns out that in one of these property descriptions, 30 or 40 years ago, there was an easement. And the property description should have said every time it was sold that there's an easement along the east side of the 100 acres consisting of a 10-foot dirt road. All right, and they missed it. So she's got a 10-foot dirt road, and the company has two options. Move the fence or buy her out. Because she's got every right to be able to get to her house, because the word easement, 10-foot wide dirt road, is in that property description. So that's why it's so important to read those property descriptions to make sure that there's not an easement on there. But one day they decide they're going to cut down all the pine trees. And somebody actually walks the 100 acres that they never had done before. And they find in this back corner back here an old broken down cabin covered with kudzu. And there's a man with a long beard living in there. And they said, who are you? What are you doing here? And he said, I've been living in this cabin 50 years. You know? Well, if he's lived there for 25 years or more, that is called adverse possession. And it's his. Now, with the old lady and the easement, they're going to either buy her out or move the fence. But with the old man that says, I've been living here for 25 years, they're going to sue him. Because if he went to the beach for a month, the 25 years is broken. If he went to Florida to take care of his daughter with cancer, the 25 years is broken. Okay, 25 years is pretty much living there except for going to the grocery store. So it's hard to win if you're the homeowner. It's hard to win on an adverse possession case. Even if you've been there 25 years, you're going to get sued, and they're going to bring in everybody you've ever known to see whether you ever left that property. Okay, finally, the state of South Carolina decides to build a road. And it's going to take the front 20 yards of our company's property. Can they do that? I see a yes. Don't just nod, yell it out. Yeah. The state can take your property anytime they want to. That is absolutely an American law. But the 14th Amendment, which we will cover, and the 5th Amendment say that you cannot take your property without just compensation. And just doesn't mean like just money. It means justice money. It means fair compensation. And the U.S. Constitution says in the 5th Amendment and in the 14th Amendment that if the government takes your property of any kind, they have to pay just compensation. So the state of South Carolina says we'll offer you $50,000 for that 20 yards. And the corporation says we want $200,000. And the state says, well, we paid the guy on this side of you $50, and we paid the guy on the west side of you $50. We're offering you $50. And the corporation says, we want $200. We've built a warehouse. We've put up a fence. So it goes to court. It's just like a lawsuit. And there's a jury. And the state of South Carolina will call real estate appraisals. That'll say, this is what we think it's worth. This is what we've paid for the last mile down that road. And the corporation will bring in real estate appraisals that say land with a warehouse is worth more. And this is what we paid for the warehouse. And this is where our employees park. And we want $200,000. And the jury decides only the dollar value. The jury cannot say the state can't take the money. Can't take the property. But the jury will decide, do they get 200 or they have to get 50 or maybe they split the difference and get 125. But whatever the jury says, that's it. It's done. And I tried a couple of adverse possession cases, and they're really interesting. The value of the property and having people testify about it, it's much cleaner than a murder case. Okay, it's businessmen, businesswomen sitting there calmly saying, I think this is what it's worth, I think this is what it's worth. And the whole thing takes about a day, and then the jury decides pretty quickly. So it's what I call a clean lawsuit, but it does happen. Personal property. Personal property is kind of like contracts. 3 things. Ownership. Title. And possession. Now, personal property is your watch, okay? It's your necklaces, it's your car, it's that ugly brown t-shirt. Those are personal property, right? It's also 100 machines that are in your mechanical warehouse. It's 200 trucks that you send all over the country. That's also personal property. When you have a business, $1 million business, the majority of your assets are in personal property. It's rarely that the land that you have, even if there's a high-rise on it, is going to be worth more than all the machines and all of the computers. Software is a personal property. Chips are personal property. So personal property for business purposes encompasses a lot. So how do you end up with all 3? And you have to have all 3. All right? Corporation A orders from China Corporation B, they order 10,000 hoodies. And those 10,000 hoodies, which are made by 11-year-old girls working 15 hours a day, they get put on a ship, and they're shipped across the Pacific, and they go through the Panama Canal, and it gets slowed up, just like these seats got slowed up, and sooner or later it makes its way to Charleston. When Corporation A ordered the 10,000 hoodies, they paid for it. and they got a receipt. They own it and they have title to it. The ship comes into the harbor in Charleston or Baltimore or Philadelphia or Boston, and they take it off the boat and they sit it in North Charleston storage. And if you ever gone down there and seen it, it's 18-wheeler packages stacked up hundreds and hundreds of feet. All right, and they cover acres and acres. And so you send somebody down there and say, I want bin number 1234. And they say, well, you can't have it. Nobody's paid for it for what we have stored on it. You know, we've got bin 1234, but China didn't pay us and you haven't paid us, and we're not letting it go until we get paid. The harbor master. The harbor master. So you've got ownership, you got title, do you have possession? No. So finally somebody pays the harbor master, pays the shipyard, and that bin, that storage bin, is put on the back of an 18-wheeler and it's driven up I-26 to Newberry, and then you have possession. Okay, and then you get possession. Another way that might happen is used car lots. Anybody's family here in the used car business? Really? Okay. Go to auction, buy used cars. When you go to the auction and you buy used cars, you pay for them. They don't let you take them till you pay for them. And you put them on the 18-wheeler stacked up. Right? And it's taken to your used car lot, right? And you get to the used car lot and somebody comes in and wants to buy one of those cars. And they say, I need a title. And you say, well, the auctions are going to send us the titles in the mail. And they may or may not ever send those titles because the car's probably stolen. And the auction house knew it, and they're glad to get rid of it. They got paid for it, and now you having to sell a car without the title. So you've got ownership, and you've got possession, but you don't have title. And so if you sell that car, the buyer has to go to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and fill out a lost title form. And they have to jump through the hoops in order to get title to the car. And that happens every day. So personal property has to have all three, just like contracts. All right, now that, giving you the A, everybody's turned in a paper, me going back over contracts, torts, property, I think that ends the first half of the semester. Okay, is everybody on board with that? Anybody got any questions or anything? Okay, anybody? All right, we will start out Monday. Keep going. We will not have a practice test this week because of fall break. So have a good weekend, and I'll see you Monday.